It is August 18th, 1590, and John White steps ashore on Roanoke Island to find his colony of 115 people, including his own daughter and infant granddaughter, gone without a trace of struggle, without graves, without fire. Carved into a post at the palisade entrance, one word, Croatoan. Someone left a message, and the men with the power to follow it chose deliberately not to. What White found when he stepped ashore on August 18th, 1590, was not chaos. There were no overturned kettles, no scattered tools, no signs of a fight. The settlement had been methodically vacated, and the single carved word was not a cry for help. It was a prearranged signal. White's own journal makes this explicit. Before he had sailed for England 3 years earlier, he and the colonists had agreed that if they relocated, they would carve their destination into a visible surface. A cross carved above the name would indicate distress. There was no cross above Croatoan. The colonists were telling him exactly where they had gone. That destination was not a random choice. 5 years before the 1587 colony even arrived, Ralph Lane's 1585 expedition had already mapped the Croatoan people on what is now Hatteras Island, roughly 50 miles south of Roanoke. The colonists had spent months trading with them, learning their language through a Croatoan man named Manteo, who had traveled to England and returned as a trusted intermediary. By 1587, the relationship between the colonists and the Croatoan was not diplomatic courtesy. It was the most reliable alliance the English had in the entire region. When the situation on Roanoke Island became untenable, moving south to Manteo's people was not a desperate gamble. It was the logical plan, possibly the only plan. But the trail does not stop at Hatteras Island. It moves inland, and that is where the evidence becomes genuinely unsettling. In 2012, researchers from the First Colony Foundation, working with the British Museum, subjected John White's Virginia Pars map to lightbox analysis and found something that had been hidden for over 4 centuries. The northern patch on the map covers an area of the Albemarle Sound where the Roanoke and Chowan rivers join, and beneath it, visible only under transmitted light, is a possible fort symbol. This patch, corresponding to modern-day Bertie County, less than 100 miles inland from Roanoke Island, was found to conceal a red and blue symbol resembling a fort, suggesting the site may have been home to a previously unknown English settlement. Someone drew that symbol, then covered it. The map was White's own document, produced under Raleigh's authority for Queen Elizabeth. The concealment was not accidental. James Horn, then Vice President of Research at the Colonial Williamsburg Foundation, stated that the evidence provides conclusive proof that they moved westward up the Albemarle Sound, and that their intention was to create a settlement. Then there is the testimony that arrives from an entirely different direction. 17 years after the colony vanished, in late 1607, John Smith was captured by the Pamunkey and taken to the influential Powhatan leader, Opechancanough, who told Smith of certain men at a place called Okanahonan, clothed like me, clothed like him, European dress, in an indigenous settlement, 2 days' journey south of Powhatan's territory. Smith was also told of a place called Anono, place for Demai, where the inhabitants possessed an abundance of brasa and chiuituamamem, brass, and houses walled like ours. Copper working and 2-story walled structures were not features of Algonquian architecture. They were features of English colonial practice. A few of the Roanoke colonists, according to the First Colony Foundation's assessment, fled up the Chowan River or found refuge with the Tuscarora people at a place called Okanahoan on the Roanoke River. The pattern repeats with unsettling precision. White's map places a hidden fort at the inland confluence. Powhatan's own oral account places clothed, copper-working people at a settlement in the same general region, and both data points converge on the same timeline. The colonists had been there, integrated and living, for roughly 20 years before Jamestown's arrival disrupted the equilibrium. Many of the colonists and their descendants were likely killed by a large raiding party of Powhatan warriors sent in the spring of 1607, apparently because Wahunsonacock feared that the newly arrived Jamestown settlers might develop contacts with the Roanoke survivors and their indigenous allies, thereby threatening his chiefdom. Once you see it, you cannot unsee it. The colonists did not vanish. They dispersed, they integrated, and they survived, long enough for Powhatan himself to know their location, long enough to build walled houses and work copper, long enough to leave a mark on the landscape that a hidden symbol on a 425-year-old map still points toward. The question that remains is a different and far more troubling one. England had White's map, Smith's testimony, and Powhatan's account, and still never sent a rescue. That silence requires an explanation, and the explanation begins with who controlled the information and what they stood to lose if the truth came out. That hidden fort symbol on White's map, covered deliberately for over 4 centuries, does that read to you as a cartographic accident or a calculated erasure? Drop your answer in the comments below, because the next question is who gave the order to bury it, and the answer points somewhere far more powerful than a map maker. And now the silence around that inland evidence demands the harder question, not where the colonists went, but why England never came to find them. The answer begins with money, and it begins in 1603, the year Sir Walter Raleigh lost his colonial charter entirely. Raleigh's fall from royal favour, accelerated by a treason conviction under James I, transferred control of Virginia's colonial enterprise to a new institutional body, the Virginia Company of London. With that transfer, the last man who had a personal stake in recovering the 1587 colonists lost all authority to act. The Virginia Company's investors were not funding a search party. They were funding a profit model, and that model required a very specific story. The wilderness of the New World was dangerous, ungoverned, and in desperate need of English civilization to tame it. A colony of 115 English men, women, and children who had walked voluntarily into the interior, integrated with indigenous communities, learned Algonquian, and built walled houses alongside native neighbors. That story did not serve the model. It inverted it. Survival through assimilation was the one outcome the empire could not afford to publicize, because it implied that indigenous society was not a void waiting to be filled, but a functioning world capable of absorbing the English on its own terms. So the myth of the lost colony was not an accident of incomplete records, it was institutionally convenient. What makes this conclusion more than a theory is what the ground itself has been saying for years, and what it said most recently in April 2025, when archaeologists recovered substantial amounts of hammerscale, a byproduct of iron forging, dated to the time period of the lost colonists, recovered from a location of Native American habitation, where metalworking was not within the technological culture of the natives. Iron forging does not migrate on its own. Someone carried that knowledge inland, practiced it inside an indigenous settlement, and left the physical residue behind in the soil. Current findings at the Salmon Creek Tract, the area designated Site X, include Algonquian Indian artifacts alongside 16th century English stoneware, the presence of which earned the site its name. The First Colony Foundation believes this could have been the spot where a group of survivors from the lost colony relocated. Among the artifact assemblage are a relatively large amount of Surrey, Hampshire borderware and sherds of North Devon plain baluster jar, provisioning jars for sea voyages, leading researchers to postulate that these finds result from Roanoke colonist activity and are not related to later English settlement in the area. Provisioning jars from English sea voyages, buried in an Algonquian site roughly 100 miles inland from Roanoke Island. And in 2025, excavations at Site X yielded a signet ring consistent with Elizabethan gentry, an object of personal status that does not belong in an indigenous settlement unless the person who wore it lived there. The First Colony Foundation has stated, "We are very confident that these excavations are linked to the Roanoke colonies. We have considered all other reasonable possibilities and can find nothing else that fits the evidence." Not every researcher agrees. Charles Ewan, an archaeologist at East Carolina University, has expressed skepticism, arguing that the team is looking to prove rather than seeking to disprove their theory, which is the scientific way. That tension is real, and it should be acknowledged. But methodological caution is not the same as a counter-explanation, and Ewan has not proposed one that accounts for the hammerscale, the provisioning jars, the signet ring, the hidden fort symbol on White's own map, and Powhatan's independent account of clothed copper-working people living 2 days south of his territory, all pointing toward the same inland corridor, all clustering around the same 2 decades. Then there is the living testimony. For generations, the Croatoan and Lumbee tribes of North Carolina have preserved oral traditions of English settlers joining their communities. In 2025, genetic analysis conducted by researchers examining Lumbee family lineages revealed European haplogroups rarely found in purely Native American populations, validating those oral traditions of ancestors with English surnames like Dare, Cooper, and Brown. While not definitive, this combination of historical surnames, regional ancestry, and mixed DNA patterns presents some of the most persuasive evidence yet that the Roanoke settlers survived through assimilation, with the evidence implying that thousands of Americans today may unknowingly carry genetic traces of Roanoke's lost settlers. 4 centuries of calling this a mystery required active maintenance. White had the map. Smith had Powhatan's testimony. The Virginia Company had both and chose neither. The colonists of Roanoke did not vanish. They were absorbed, they survived, and the empire that sent them chose, with institutional precision, to look the other way. The lost colony was never lost. It was buried, and the burying was the point. Subscribe for more hidden history, and don't miss this one next. The Jamestown Massacre of 1622, another colonial mystery with no easy answers.